Trump visits the troops, and the media covers it in the most ridiculous way possible, as usual. A terrible tragedy in Morocco, and a look back at where 100,000 air miles took me in 2018. Coming up on The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Thanks for being with us. I'm Chuck Holton. So the troops in Iraq got a nice surprise the day after Christmas, a visit from the First Lady and her husband. Seriously though, Trump's first visit with U.S. troops in an active conflict zone was the normal dog and pony show with lots of selfies and group photos and a few meetings and a speech. This all happened while news outlets, and I use that term kind of loosely, like MSNBC and the Huffington Post, were posting articles criticizing the president for not visiting the troops this holiday season. And when they found out he in fact had made a secret trip to Iraq, then they shifted their reporting to criticize Trump for taking photos with the troops. Some tried to make a scandal out of the fact that he posted a video of himself taking photos with a troop of U.S. special operators and called it a violation of operational security. So let's think about this with more than two brain cells, shall we? How exactly is this a breach of OPSEC? Is anyone surprised to find out there are Navy SEALs on duty in Iraq? These men weren't wearing any recognizable name tapes or insignia, so no problem there. They aren't giving away any TTPs or top secret equipment. Heck, their faces are hardly recognizable. And Donald Trump is their commander-in-chief. If there's a problem here, I just don't see it. The reality is that most of the people calling this an OPSEC violation wouldn't recognize a true OPSEC violation if it was handed to them. The other issue I saw bandied about on CNN by who else? Jim Acosta, was that Trump was somehow causing the troops to go against military regulations by signing their MAGA hats. Seriously. His assertion was that the troops are prohibited from campaigning for any political party. What? How is getting your hat signed by the commander-in-chief campaigning for a political party? I mean, that's a stretch even for CNN. Heck, the commander-in-chief has the power to amend or change military regulations if he wants to. But this is just crazy. There's no reality where this was inappropriate. But CNN doesn't deal in reality. It deals in spin. Now, what do I think about the president's visit? Well, the president needs to go see the troops, and it's generally good for morale when he does, although it sometimes causes a mountain of busy work and late nights as the troops whitewash everything in sight before he arrives. Been there. In this case, though, that probably didn't happen because it was a surprise visit, which is good. From a political standpoint, it's generally good for the president's image, too. The media crowing about the president using troops as campaign props isn't an outright lie, but every politician uses visits to the troops to improve his image. Barack Obama did it, George Bush did it, everyone does it. The president's speech to the troops was the only thing I really take issue with. He used the speech to double down on his decision to pull troops out of Syria.
The men and women stationed at al-Assad have played a vital role in the military defeat of ISIS in Iraq and in Syria. Because of these gains, our service members in Syria can now return home to their families. Some will come here for a stay, but a lot of them are going to be going back home where they want to be with their families. They've done a fantastic job. Originally, years ago, they came here, and it was supposed to be for 3 to 4 months, and that was a long time ago. That was many years ago. But what a job you have done, what a job they have done. I made it clear from the beginning that our mission in Syria was to strip ISIS of its military strongholds. We're not nation building. Rebuilding Syria will require a political solution, and it's a solution that should be paid for by its very rich neighboring countries, not the United States. Let them pay for it, and they will. They will. In fact, Saudi Arabia yesterday, you probably read, stepped up to the plate and has already made a commitment of substantial funds for development. And President Erdogan of Turkey has also agreed to take out any remnants of ISIS, and we'll be working with them. We're going to be working with them. Our presence in Syria was not open-ended and was never intended to be permanent. 8 years ago, we went there for 3 months, and we never left. But now we're doing it right. And we're going to finish it off. 1 year ago, I gave our generals 6 more months in Syria. I said, go ahead, get them. And it turns out it was really a year and a half ago. I said, go get them. We need 6 months. Go get them. Then they said, give us another 6 months. I said, go get them. Then they said, can we have one more period of 6 months? I said, nope. I said, I gave you a lot of 6 months, and now we're doing it a different way. And we're doing it, and you're doing it, folks. You're doing it. Just the remnants. The men and women who serve are entitled to clear objectives and the confidence that when those objectives are met, they can come home and be with their families. Our objective in Syria was always to retake the territory controlled by ISIS. Some people said we've already retaken 99%. That's a number that comes up a lot. And if you look at the map before and after, it looks like 99%. Now that we have done so, the nations of the region must step up and take more responsibility for their future. And also, they have to confront those remnants of ISIS and take them out very easily if, after we're totally finished, they're even left at all. There will be a strong, deliberate, and orderly withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria. Very deliberate, very orderly, while maintaining the U.S. presence in Iraq to prevent an ISIS resurgence and to protect U.S. interests, and also to always watch very closely over any potential reformation of ISIS, and also to watch over Iran. We'll be watching.
I've been saying this all along. The president's wrong to pull troops out of Syria, and his reasoning is shoddy. To hear him explain it, it seems he believes that we're out there putting American blood and treasure on the line to simply be the world's policeman. That's not true. If that were the case, we'd have troops in Burma and Venezuela for the last 10 years or more, just to pick two easy examples. Look, we deploy our forces in our own national interests, and until the compelling reason for deploying them goes away, we don't need to be pulling them out. I keep saying this, you can't just stop a war. You either win it or you lose it. This should make us exceedingly careful about the wars we get into, and 100% all in to win it once our troops are committed. Now, I understand where the president's coming from, because I've also said before that we're very good at defeating the enemy, but very bad at nation building. Our forces aren't equipped to go from warrior to diplomat on a dime. So once the enemy's defeated, we need to look very carefully at our reasons for staying. In the case of Syria, however, there are still very compelling reasons to stay. My friend Dave Eubank of the Free Kurdish Rangers made a really good point about this in an article he wrote this morning. We have a moral commitment to stay in Syria to support the Kurds, the Christians, the Druze, the Yazidis, and other disaffected minorities who have only genocide to look forward to if we pull out now. There are also tactical and strategic decisions to stay beyond the imminent collapse of ISIS. The president spoke to the troops as if they would be in total agreement with him that they'd rather be back stateside. Now, I'll admit it's not their place to say what they would prefer. Their job is to follow orders and go where they're sent. But if you did ask U.S. troops whether they'd prefer fighting terrorists or practicing drill and ceremony and doing barracks inspections back stateside, I'd wager most of our warriors would rather be busy killing bad guys. Nobody wants to spend their entire enlistment training for the Super Bowl and then never get to play. Now, let's turn our attention to a terrible tragedy in Morocco. 2 Scandinavian young women backpacking in the Atlas Mountains were attacked and brutally murdered by a group of extremist Muslim men on December 16th. The story's gained worldwide attention, which is always the case when 2 pretty white girls are murdered on holiday. But some arrests have been made and the perpetrators linked to a Muslim terror group, although the authorities refuse to identify which one. A lot of ink has been spilled over this story, and I don't want to rehash the whole thing for you. But I do want to point out a few items that you should take into consideration for your own personal security when you're traveling. Now, let me make this crystal clear. I am in no way blaming these young women for what happened to them. The guilt here lies solely and exclusively with the monsters who murdered them, okay? So let's get that straight. Now, having said that, let me point out a few things, because I see things like this happening all the time. European 20-somethings are some of the most intrepid travelers I've ever met. I run into them all over the world on holiday in places like El Salvador, Vietnam, Jordan, and almost every day here in Panama. Often these groups are made up of pretty young women traveling alone or in pairs, looking to save money by camping out or staying in the absolute cheapest hostels they can find. Okay, that's fine. It's all well and good. But very often these kids, and look, I'm allowed to call them kids because I'm almost 50, they're taking risks that they don't even understand. And it's super important when you travel to be intentional about the image you're presenting in light of the local culture and customs. I want to put it this way. Do you want to look like a bunny rabbit or a wolf? Very often these young women don't understand the culture where they're traveling. And so they inadvertently walk around oblivious to the fact that they're presenting an image of vulnerability and maybe even promiscuity that they certainly don't intend to portray. Remember the point I made about this in regards to the refugees flooding into Europe this spring? Watch this video. Imagine that you grew up in Syria or Afghanistan or someplace like that. The only women you've ever seen that don't have a burqa on are in your own family. And all of a sudden you come to Germany and you go to take the bus one day. And here on the side of the bus stop is Germany's next top model. Now, let me just explain something to you. You've never seen anything like this in your life. And what is that going to make you think about German culture? What's that going to make you think about the sexual politics of how you find a girlfriend here or how you approach women? And I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm not saying there's anything bad with German culture. I'm just saying it's that different. And if you've never been exposed to it before, it's really shocking. Now, this is doubly true when a Western woman travels to a majority Muslim country, even one that's supposedly modern and liberal. I think there are a couple of really important takeaways from this story. One, when traveling, you should think really hard about the image you're portraying and be intentional about making yourself look less appealing to the predators that are definitely out there. Number two, you should be careful about the risks you're taking just to save a buck. Sometimes it's worth paying a little more so you can be sure you're sleeping safely at night. And lastly, don't underestimate your value. I mean, if you had a 50-carat diamond necklace, you'd probably be careful about walking around the streets of San Salvador or Caracas, for example, flashing it around. I say this especially to young women. Like it or not, as a woman, you are walking around with one of the most valuable assets on this planet, your body. Ask any red-blooded male if he'd rather have a diamond necklace or a willing female body. And for the most part, their choices would be clear. You might hate the fact that the world works this way, but you're not going to change it. Wherever you go, many of the men around are looking at you like sex on a stick. You can either feed their fantasies or foul them by the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, and the places you choose to go. I'm not blaming the victims here. I'm just pointing out the hard reality of the world we live in. Back in 2014, I was driving around our town and I happened to see two Scandinavian girls with backpacks on waiting for a bus. And they were young and cute and they just caught my eye. A few days later, the news reported those same two girls missing in Boquete, another tourist town here in Panama. Months later, their remains were found on a hiking trail in the mountains outside that town. Their bras and at least one pair of pants were found separate from their remains. Now, no definite conclusion of foul play was ever reached, but I think it's easy to say these women got in over their heads. So whether or not they were murdered, it's another chilling reminder that there are unseen risks to travel, even in countries that are considered safe. And that shouldn't keep us from traveling, but it should make us want to be very intentional about our own security. We're going to do a lot of good for a lot of people in 2019, and you can be a part of it. Just visit patreon.com/hotzone and subscribe for $3 a month. And when I run into people in need, you'll get to help them directly. and see the effects of your generosity. So this coming year, don't just watch the news, get involved in it with me, Chuck Holton, here on The Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.